Well, it's Mothering Sunday, as you will know, and it might strike a chord in your memory that this time last year, minus 1 week, was the first service we ever had together on Zoom. And so I feel we need a small pause to let this sink in that we are still here a year on. And so my memory was sort of coming into action, and I thought about, oh, maybe I'll look up that service and remind myself. But of course, in those days, a year ago, imagine we didn't even have a YouTube channel. So there's no service to look up. But Mark's sermon is on the website, and I reminded myself of that. And in that sermon, I don't know if you recall, he pointed us to Mother Julian of Norwich, the Anglican hermit who was practicing self-isolation before it became fashionable. And she wrote this insight: Jesus Christ, who overcame evil with good, is our true mother. And I'd like to take that as an opening quotation for this Mothering Sunday. Jesus Christ is our true mother. There are certain days in the year that are asked by society and the church to bear a lot of weight. And for a preacher in particular, two that stand out are Remembrance and Mother's Day or Mothering Sunday. And usually the Sundays that bear a lot of weight, if you know what I mean by that, are Sundays where there's been some spiritual input and there's been some secular, and the two things are continually colliding. And Mothering Sunday is a really good illustration of this. So today I'd just like to go through a brief history of how we got here with Mother's Day, and then how we might be able to take the weight off slightly. So Mothering Sunday began in the 16th century, and it was a kind of pilgrimage. The word mothering in that phrase, Mothering Sunday, actually referred to the Mother Church. That is the main church or cathedral of the region. And as a relief from the Lenten fast and other austere Lenten practices, worshippers were encouraged to return to the Mother Church for a special service, and it was 3/4 of the way through Lent. And for any of you who've ever been involved in rural multi-parish ministry, this was the equivalent of the team service. And if you returned to Mother Church, you were going a mothering. And so this day of refreshment in Lent came to be known as Laetare Sunday or Refreshment Sunday. And even today, some priests will be dressed in rose-coloured vestments as the sombre purple of Lent gives way to that paler colour. And it's a bit like when we marked, or at least we said the word Gaudete on Gaudete Sunday, which is the third Sunday in Advent. Similar idea. It's rejoicing and it's lighting that pink candle. So the colours can help us to kind of navigate this special day. And eventually domestic servants and farm workers were given a day off to visit their own families and their mothers, as well as attending Mother Church. But this link with the Mother Church had fallen out of fashion by the dawn of the 20th century, with increasing mobility and people not really knowing where their Mother Church was because of the secularization of society. But meanwhile, in America, a lady called Anna Jarvis was creating a completely different day, which was a secular version, and she called it Mother's Day, which was to celebrate originally her mother, who was a peace activist in the American Civil War. And Mother's Day as a public holiday in the States was finally signed into law by President Woodrow Wilson. Ironically, Anna Jarvis later condemned it for becoming too commercialised. But its invention revived Mothering Sunday here in the UK, and so that's where we are today. We are inhabiting the crossroads of a largely culturally irrelevant religious practice and a somewhat commercialised day in celebration of mothers. And into the whole concept of motherhood and its associations with loss, we have another stream flowing, if you like. So we think today perhaps especially of those who've not been able to be mothers and those who never wanted to be, and those for whom the right partner never came along with whom to raise a family. And so there you have a day that's bearing a lot of weight. Because family patterns today are complex, and we're much more aware than we used to be of negative experiences to do with mothering. It's not always everyone's favourite day, and some of us might have come here this morning with slightly mixed feelings, and some will understandably have absented themselves. And with the pandemic, it's not even possible unless you live with your mum to meet up inside to see your mum today, or to have the sort of family meals and gatherings that the hospitality trade thrives on this particular day. For many, because of COVID, this will be the first Mothering Sunday without their mother. And for some, it will be the first Mothering Sunday without their child. So however you're feeling today, I wonder how we as a church might relieve the day of all this weight, especially because mothers often feel they need to be everything to everyone. And giving them one day a year when they're relieved of this feeling doesn't really seem enough. How can Mothering Sunday be good news, whilst at the same time provide recognition that celebrations for some are days of sadness for others? What resources does our tradition give us to nurture us all on Mothering Sunday? Well, we've got two narratives from scripture that Josie read so beautifully this morning, and they celebrate women partnering with God. So we're going to look at those first, and then we'll return to the comforting idea that Christ, or if you find it more helpful, God, is our mother. The two stories illustrate situations where, despite danger and death, God was active in the unfolding of his salvation plan and had pivotal roles for women in the process. But essentially, God took the strain. So we began with Exodus, that famous Sunday school story of Moses being brought up from the bulrushes. At first sight, it's a simple, unusual, and therefore memorable tale of a baby floating in his cradle down the river. It's almost peaceful and tranquil. The gently flowing Nile, the tall reeds, the mother nearby. In reality, it was anything but. The preceding chapter of Exodus tells us about the systematic oppression and attempted genocide of the Israelites in Egypt. So this is where the Old Testament gives us all its beauty and simplicity when we're telling Bible stories in Sunday school, and then the reveal as you get older and you realise that life is horribly complicated and very difficult sometimes. It's a story, like so many others, of scapegoating a people who are considered foreigners in the land. This is in Exodus 1, so going back a chapter. They're made to do all the menial jobs whilst everyone complains about how many resources they're taking from the legitimate occupants of the country. It's a story that we hear played out over and over again. And when this fear of the stranger in Exodus 1 gets to hysteria level, the king, that is the Pharaoh, as you know, orders the systematic wiping out of the Israelites by selective infanticide. The midwives to the Hebrews are told, if it's a boy, kill it. If it's a girl, let it live. And again, in chapter 1 of Exodus, we're told that the midwives, and two of them are specifically named, feared God more than they feared Pharaoh, and so they let the baby boys live. When summoned before the king to account for their actions, they tell the Pharaoh that the Hebrew women are more vigorous than the Egyptian women and give birth before the midwives arrive, like my friend Carolyn, who gave birth on the hall floor just after her husband had popped out to pick up the other children from school. So at the start of our Old Testament reading today, we see Moses' mother, no doubt scared witless by the decree to exterminate baby boys, hiding him at home until he's too big, and then casting him upon the Nile in a waterproof cradle. It's hard to imagine the sense of desperation she must have felt as she watched the little crying bundle drift away. The plot thickens. Moses' sister is keeping watch. Pharaoh's daughter has compassion, and Moses' mother gets paid to nurse her own baby, a novel idea that might have a lot of potential for social good. We are left with the distinct impression that the eventual deliverance of the Israelite people from slavery is due in no small part to the efforts of a number of very smart women. The midwives, his mother, his sister, his adoptive mother, all of whom practiced a form of mothering that was resilient, subversive, protective, and enormously courageous. And so to the gospel. It's a scene at the foot of the cross, a small paragraph in John. The prophetic words of Simeon to Mary, the mother of Jesus, if you remember when he said, "A sword will pierce your own soul," are being played out in all their full horror. I don't know how you imagine that scene at the foot of the cross. It's increasingly dark. There are anguished cries. There is weeping. There is jeering. There is blood. Each of the gospel writers has Mary, the mother of Jesus, present at the scene, as John does here. But Matthew, Mark, and Luke, if you take them together, include further named women. And taken across the four Gospels, it's suggested that as well as Mary keeping vigil, there was also her sister, Mary Magdalene, somebody called Mary, wife of Clopas, another Mary who was the mother of James and Joses, and Salome, the mother of James and John. Here we see wives and mothers and sisters standing in solidarity with victims of violence, just like we've seen calls this week for vigils to reclaim our streets as places that are safe for women to walk at night in the wake of the abduction and death of Sarah Everard. And we see Jesus making provision for his widowed mother, even as he takes his last few breaths on the cross. "Woman, behold your son," and to John, "Behold your mother." A beautiful picture of relationships of love that transcend genetics. The Bible is a book full largely of the exploits of men, but if we look closely, we see in it an army of women who showed both compassion and courage as they enabled others to be born, to grow, to be safe, and finally to live out their destiny. And so to return at the end to Mother Julian's "Christ is our true mother." Because if it's all on mothers, who mothers the mothers? We all need mothering. We all need ongoing nurture, love, affirmation and care, and we will need it from somebody till the end of our lives. Mothers particularly need to know that it doesn't all depend on them. The portrayal of the women in our two readings gives us many faces of mothering, of nurture and protection, the sort of mothering that can be offered by anyone who cares. And our readings show us that God cares and offers us his own mothering love that is steadfast, nurturing and liberating. We care because God cares for us. Christ is our true mother and beckons us to rest a while in his enfolding love on this of all days. Amen.